I stared at the folder on the mahogany desk, the kind that had always seemed imposing in my father-in-law's study. The words on the top sheet felt like a physical weight. Divorce papers. My hand hovered above the signature line, trembling, not from fear, but from the quiet disbelief that this was happening. He had said it so plainly, as if life were a contract and I had already failed. Since you couldn't give us Anheir, this marriage is over. My husband didn't look at me. He didn't even glance up from the wine glass he was cradling, as if it were shielding him from the conversation. Silence filled the room, thick enough to suffocate. I signed each page slowly, methodically, feeling the ink settle like a verdict on a life I hadn't fully lived yet. Memory surfaced unbidden. I remembered the afternoons we had spent laughing quietly in corners of this same house, my best friend offering small comforts I'd almost forgotten. The way her hand had brushed mine once when I had cried silently in the kitchen. A trivial gesture at the time, but now it felt prophetic. I remembered the nights spent lying awake, listening to the hum of the city outside the window, and wondering if anyone truly saw me, or if I had been invisible all along. The quiet hum of the chandelier seemed louder than the words that had been spoken, and then, soft, deliberate, the sound of paper shifting. My friend stood. She held a brown envelope, simple, unremarkable, yet heavy in its implications. She moved with calm authority, her eyes meeting mine only briefly before turning toward him. He took it, curiosity and suspicion etched into every line of his face. He opened it slowly, as if he knew instinctively that whatever lay inside would change the room, the air, the balance. And it did. The color drained from his cheeks. His hands, which had seemed so steady when dictating judgments, now hovered uncertainly. He read, and read again, but the effect was unmistakable. The authority he had wielded so effortlessly slipped through his fingers. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let the silence do the work. The papers in my hands, the envelope in his, they were markers of change. My husband's gaze lingered on the floor, not on me, not on her. It was a quiet acknowledgement that the structure he had depended on was no longer unassailable. I remembered then the small, cumulative betrayals, the dismissive tone, the unspoken expectations, the subtle manipulations. Each one had seemed minor until this moment crystallized them. The conversations that had ended in a heavy silence. The nights spent with anxiety gnawing at me while no one noticed, the way I had been expected to absorb humiliation quietly. And yet, despite the humiliation intended by the divorce, I felt no urge for loud revenge. My dignity was not in the papers. It was in the steadiness of my hands, the clarity in my mind, the recognition that control had shifted silently but irrevocably. The father-in-law's presence, once so domineering, had become fragile. I could see it in the small gestures, the way his fingers trembled on the armrest, the slight hitch in his breath, the nervous shift of his weight. He had always thrived on certainty, on the illusion of unbroken power. That illusion was gone, leaving only the quiet, undeniable authority of truth in the envelope he now held. My husband's reaction was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A slight slump of the shoulders, a long exhale, an acknowledgement that he had been part of a system that demanded compliance rather than understanding. He drank again, slower this time, as if tasting the reality of his impotence. It was a small shift, barely noticeable, yet enough to signify the change in dynamics. I remembered the times I had doubted myself, wondering if the problem truly was me, if my worth was defined by someone else's expectations. I remembered the moments of quiet rebellion, the small choices that felt insignificant at the time, but had accumulated into resilience. And now, as I sat there, hand steady, heart cautious but clear, I understood those small choices had brought me here, to a quiet power no one could take without acknowledgement. When the envelope had done its work, my friend sat back down, unflinching. There was no fanfare, no dramatic declaration, only the calm, measured weight of consequence. The room's tension didn't dissolve, it merely rebalanced. And in that balance, I could feel the subtle authority returning to me, not as spectacle, but as quiet, undeniable reality. I stood, careful not to rush, careful to mark my own passage through it. My signature on those divorce papers was not the end of me. It was a recognition of it. Every measured step toward the door was a step away from the expectations and judgments that had bound me. The father-in-law's dominance, which had seemed unassailable, had been neutralized without confrontation, without loud vindication. Outside, the air was still, carrying faint traces of winter chill. I walked slowly, absorbing each step, letting the crisp air fill spaces that had long been heavy with tension. I did not glance back. There was no need to watch them process their own realization. I had already processed mine. My life was not the one they had dictated, but it was mine. The authority I had lost long ago in their eyes had returned, not with spectacle, but with subtle, undeniable weight. I did not shout it. I did not flaunt it, but I carried it in every breath, every controlled movement, every thought that reminded me that dignity is not given, it is quietly reclaimed. And for the first time that day, I breathed fully, understanding that justice does not always roar. Sometimes it settles calm and measured into the spaces left behind by arrogance and betrayal. I walked into the fading light of afternoon, aware that the house The papers, the envelopes, they were no longer the arbiters of my worth, I was. And in that quiet certainty, I realized something I had long forgotten: survival and dignity are not always loud victories. Sometimes they are the silent moments that arrive after all expectation, all judgment, all control have shifted, and the world simply notices without comment.